Right, we're recording. Okay, all right. Welcome, everybody. It's Valentine's Day, hence the background. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's alumni webinar for Design Science. I'm Alicia Markey. I am the recruiter for Design Science, and I just want to cover what we're going to go over today before I give it over to our alumni. So we're going to cover our alumni introduction. Holden will introduce himself in a minute. Then we're going to go over kind of our overview of the program. Holden might actually touch on that too, so we'll see where we go there. And then we'll open up for any questions that you specifically have about design science, maybe his favorite courses, the university, just anything that you want to know about the program. And then if there's no other kind of questions, we'll go into the deadlines for the applications because those are coming up, and then contact information so that if you have anything that comes up after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to me. So now I'm going to hand it over to Holden so that he can share and introduce himself.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Holden. I'm one of the graduates of the Design Science program. I believe I was class of 2023. And yeah, let's see. I have a little slide deck that I prepared, and I'm going to share that right now. Let's see. So I'll get right into my background. So I joined the Design Science program after attaining a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of North Texas, which at the time that I was enrolled and finished was one of the top visual communication design programs in the country. And a lot of the curriculum was focused on strategic thinking, market analysis, that sort of thing. But in addition to that, they really taught us the importance of understanding our demographic, our clients, and the opportunities we saw in the market, in addition to being very talented with creative execution, that sort of thing. But I found myself becoming more and more interested with why certain decisions were being made. And some of those became questions that I took into discussions about equity or discussions about digital parity, Parity, parity. And I found a lot of those things were not particularly conducive to the job market in Dallas. Dallas, if some of you aren't aware, is one of the major cities in Texas, and Dallas historically has a lot of money involved. So it only stands to reason that advertising would be one of the main applications for a graphic designer in that part of the country. And personally, I found advertising to just be not really capable of scratching that itch. So I started talking to a lot of people that I knew, some of which were alumni from the University of Michigan, particularly at a time when these kinds of feelings were becoming very dominant in the uh, active professional field of design. A lot of these conversations spun off into new aspects of excuse me, aspects of discipline as well as aspects of creative strategy. If any of you are familiar with the humanist design movement, those sorts of questions about what is the real value of this particular campaign? What is the value culturally of this down the road? One story that really stuck with me was a teacher who was designing toys, and a particularly infamous movie came out in American pop culture called Rambo, which is fascinating. A lot of people remember it for just this, kind of intense action movie, but people also interpreted it as this sort of post-Vietnam era story about how do we respond to this huge cultural upheaval. So anyway, the point of this particular experience was that one of my favorite teachers from undergrad was working for a toys company at the time that this movie came out. And one assignment he got was to create children's toys around the movie Rambo. And the way he tells the story, he asked to be removed from that project altogether. So it was these kinds of connections that I made, which were very few but very special in my undergraduate training, that sort of gave me a sense that there was a larger collection of people who felt similarly, who had a very specialized training in something that had commercial viability, but felt a calling or a real importance to things that were not so commercially viable, such as design research. And I say that as somebody coming from the fine arts. In the fine arts world, design research is, a hobby for a lot of people. So I started looking at things that could maybe slow my path down just a little bit and get me to reflect on the needs that I saw in the world from my small corner of it. And that led me to the design science program at the University of Michigan. Mostly because design science exists as this really fascinating little intersectional discipline. And what that means is that it's really hard to nail down as a real black and white. I mean, obviously, the design science stems from this College of Engineering, but it's kind of this product of mechanical engineering and computer science as well. And they recommend that people come to it with all sorts of different backgrounds, such as political science, urban planning, architecture, medical innovation. And it was reading all of this that really got me thinking this might be where I'll find certain people like me who received one kind of training and see this application that, again, there isn't really a set path for it. But if this exists, there must be a real necessity for these kinds of conversations. So on this slide, I can't stand really even like listening to myself in a recording or watching anything of me, but I come back to this a lot. There was something I wrote in one of my personal statements, which I might still be required for the admissions office if you apply to this particular program, but it's sort of done here in the right side. It's in addition to affecting the market share of commercial entities or an individual's affinity for one product over another, design has demonstrated its capability to establish, sustain, and curve patterns of behavior, from public safety to systemic oppression. And that is something that when I feel kind of caught up in where I'm going now or who I'm meeting with or what sort of ways can I really apply this sort of thing, that's something that I come back to a lot. And I find that even though things have changed over the last couple of years, this is something that I really truly believe in. And evidently it resonated with the design science program as well. And as you will come to learn, the by heart, I assure you, the definition of design science, which is the creation and embedding of artifacts in a particular environment and oh, excuse me, the creation and embedding of artifacts in a particular environment and measuring their impact, which is really what design science is all about. Whether you, well, hang on, let me get ahead of myself. So, one of my favorite aspects of design science is that the program is allows you to pilot your own electives. And so, as I was going through this sort of week by week, meeting a variety of different people, I found that it was less about art that I really cared about, and it was less about really design research that I cared about. And what kept coming back to at the core of it was this intersection of community and communication. So, the advantage of the design science program, being able to pilot your own electives, really allowed me to live between the space of academic research for the engineering school and social work and entrepreneurship, which I honestly can't think of a single graduate program out there that would allow you to just naturally do these sorts of things, which is really, it's frightening at first. I can think of probably three different kinds of careers I envisioned myself being a part of when I was getting started with that first semester's course selection. But having the resources and the kinds of network connections that you meet, seminar in particular is one where we had this revolving door of guest speakers. Each one was from a completely different, you know, professional aspect than the other. And the people that you'll meet in this program are really fascinating because there might be very little that you have in common right away, but the more time you spend working together and reading and sharing literature, the more you'll realize that uh, design really is the great motivator for change that transcends, professional practice or transcends even language itself. And it's really just a special thing to set out on this journey and find the electives that resonate with you and seeing how all these sorts of things culminate, even from I I guess just to illustrate this point, I took electives in social work, I took electives in engineering, I took electives in entrepreneurship, and all of those things I use on a daily basis. because they have very small lessons in each one of them that make it easier for me to come into a project or a work environment or really anything and use skills that I learned in a survey measurement course to understand the information that I need right away, whether that's on an interpersonal level or an intrapersonal level, working with my teammates or working within a larger system of professional practice to just get work done. And those sorts of things become, I mean, it's less about getting the work done and it's more about having that little bit of buffer space to look at all of the systems at work and see how we can optimize certain systems here and there, whether they're on a small scale or a major scale. And an example that I would just like to borrow would be one of my experiences from the design science program altogether in 502, which at my time was the second semester course. And it becomes almost like you spend an entire semester leading your own case study. At least that was the structure of it when I was enrolled in design science. And we had free reign of any sort of research project we wanted to undertake. And we just had to measure it. So it had to be whatever impact we wanted, as long as we could measure it and prove a positive success or a negative success, or, of course, a non-correlative success. And at the time, we were all just involved as a cohort with all of these incredible projects, some of them stressful, some of them just draining, not from the main program itself, but if you haven't had a graduate school experience, sometimes the way they just sort of pull you here and there. You can go to a course that is designed for advanced R instruction or R coding, and then go and take, what I did, which was just a philosophy course on justice in the digital world. So it's sometimes that kind of this can be discombobulating. And so something we wanted to focus on in my group for this assignment was being able to disclose on an emotional level and an intellectual level the types of stressors going on that might be impacting our productivity in a group project. Crazy. And so what we did was prototype a participatory game designed around these major milestones in a project, which works out the way that my electives in the engineering school were designed. We had something called design reviews or gateway reviews. So it was really tailored to that specific time in a project. And the whole game was just about talking. There was no, we made a board and we, had a deck of cards that went along with it. But the important part was just talking with each other about things that were either changing over the course of our life in a major way, say moving across the country or moving from another country, uh, or just little things like moved into a new place and I don't know when garbage day is, which happens to me every couple of years. So the point of that really is to say that one of the wonderful things about design science is that there's never really a time when you're told that design itself as a particular kind of practice has to be performed one way or the other. I think design science is strong because it doesn't really take this binary imagination to design. At the heart of it, design really is about change, making it and measuring it. And the reason I'm, very happy with this particular little project, which, mind you, wasn't even the capstone, is just because it taught me truly that change can start out so small and then become something that, if it's habitualized, can lead to a positive direction for growth. And it was a year later that the instructor of this particular section reached out to my group. I think I had just started a new job at the time, so I wasn't really checking my school email at that moment. But the instructor reached out and said, "Hi, I'd really like to pilot this game. Do you have, the resources? Do you have a copy of everything?" And the answer was yes. We were happy to. And that was nice because I think if there's any sort of lesson in that, especially for somebody who's thinking about beginning a journey to this new kind of academic experience, it's very easy to get caught up in the scope of things, whether you're working in a 5-year program, if you choose to go from master's to PhD and the scope of everything becomes 5 years long, or you're working on a publishing your first paper, single authorship too, which is really, if you can do a single authorship paper as a master's, it's really my hat's off to you. It's um it's important to remember that design is a small thing with very great importance. It's a precious thing that if there's any opportunity to make a difference in your life or the life of another, or the way that something is taught, or the way that something is built, or the way that something is just presented to an audience full of people, it is absolutely invaluable. Uh, the things that you'll learn and the types of conversations you'll have if you really insert yourself into that particular environment. So, with that, I would like to open up the floor to questions about either design science or about how much I love design or anything that's really on your mind about the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
First of
Holden.
all, yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. That was really easy to follow, and it really like hit all the key points in the exact way that I wanted them to be hit. So that was
Oh,
perfect.
oh.
Could not have asked for a better presentation. And for a little bit of my background, actually,
Mhm.
I also grew up in Dallas as well, and I had a lot of
Really?
close friends that ended up at UNT. So like completely am like familiar with like the
Hmm.
program and the position that you were in, and very, very similar to you. I ended up going to UT Austin and studying architecture,
Mm.
and exactly similar to you, where like I really enjoyed the more like strategic, like decision making, like what's the program of the building, how are the people going to be impacted,
Hmm.
and exactly like you said, like in the School of Architecture, design research was also considered like a hobby, and very much of like, why are you doing that? Like just kind of like fudge the numbers and get to what the actual
Hmm.
building looks like, you know what I mean? And I was like,
Right.
this maybe is like actually not the best way to design for people, you know what I mean? Um, and so very similar to you, I started looking at like potential programs that would kind of bridge my existing experience in architecture with something a little bit more like design research
Hmm.
oriented and strategy oriented. And so great to hear that that's what your experience has been in the program. And also great to hear that you're able to take such a variety of courses and apply your background in a lot of different ways, because I know that this program is kind of housed within the College of Engineering. And I know that Kathleen has a mechanical engineering background. And so I
Hmm.
was kind of like, I was unsure if I would struggle in this program if I don't have kind of a deep knowledge of mechanical engineering. But
Hmm.
it's good to hear that that's not the case. And
Certainly.
the thing that I would like to hear most about you, and the thing that is something that's kind of been on my mind a lot, is
Hmm.
that after your experience with this program, because it's such a unique program, like you were talking about, I'm curious to hear about your experiences kind of communicating what exactly this degree was to potential future employers, and how that experience kind of aligns with the roles that they're looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'd like to start off by saying this is often a conversation that is had with, uh, so I'll speak from my experience. This was a conversation that we used to, hang on, let's see. That particular question is something that we, as currently enrolled students, always asked
Mhm.
the graduates who came before us. And I will say that it's an odd um it's something that when you meet another design science student at the University of Michigan, it's always
Mhm.
something that gets you a date for a cup of coffee because it's a really specialized program, and something that if you choose to experience this program and enroll in it, it's something that you feel as you're going to each session. Like there's something young about it. There's something forming about it. It often feels that you're kind of pioneering this really odd, emergent field. And what you'll learn is exactly what the you'll you'll learn how to communicate your own value about what this is. So like my whole presentation. My whole presentation that I gave you today was an entire week spent trying to figure out, what was it all about? What kept me going through the whole process? Fortunately, the program's only a year, and I say fortunately because it gives you enough time to really think deeply about the kind of impact you want to make on the other side of this. And it also, you might find, if you haven't yet, that the academic world moves at a very different pace than the professional world. So to get into an academic environment for a year and get back into a professional world in a year is kind of like, it's almost like I can only think of something like from a poem that I read where it's like passing through the mirror and then right back out and nothing really changed. Like you have all the experience of everything else and then you can go right back and there's really no time lost. It's not exactly like a black hole, like a say I have friends who are like in 6 year programs and there's something that happens which it's complicated, but for a 1 year program, you get to see how the industry is changing and you can design your courses around curbing that change so that when you get out, it's easy to pivot and make connections. I would say, additionally, that the way you communicate your value really becomes not unlike a design science research project where you find your particular, your if it helps, I don't like this word much, but if it helps you think about it, you find your client, whether that's like your dream job or your dream internship or your research space. You sort of have to tailor everything around that particular experience. I know people who came into it and didn't have a particular company in mind, but they came from a very different background and moved into user-centered research and design. And I knew people who took that kind of field and focused on the HCI, which is one of the electives offered through, I believe I know it's somewhere in engineering, but it's human computer interaction. And that deals with certain types of heuristics and ergonomics that were not covered in something like the School of Information's user experience courses. HCI, from what I understand, was about the legibility of text on a screen and how does the brightness and relationship of a user to its computer interface really change, long-term health, that sort of thing, which is fascinating to me, and I'm sure as an architect, it's something that would also be fascinating to you.
Time.
Um, I would say that with so a third point is that the rate at which you make connections in this program, you really figure out a lean version of whatever it is, you want your career as a mission statement to be. Um, the thing that was most consistent, so the thing to always fall back on when you're in this program and looking to make connections outside of the university is to first commit to memory the design science mission statement. And then number two is to say, design science is a mixture of strategic problem solving with a focus on systemic application. So it has its roots sort of like in systems design and human-centered design. And I think it becomes it becomes its own personal statement, sort of the way to talk about it. But it really trying to think of how to say this and um the courses you take it really that will really influence how you introduce yourself in a particular problem space, I would say. Really I wouldn't have thought I would have so much in common with social work students um when communicating something that I got in an engineering school. But there's
Yeah.
you learn how to tailor your conversation. And I think that makes it also easier to insert yourself as a designer into new problem spaces. So I guess to summarize all of that, I would say that your gut is right. I have not seen anybody out there with a job application for a design scientist, with 1 year experience in college engineering, that sort of thing. But it's really about how you introduce yourself and promoting the skill sets you've learned in a short amount of time that are useful to that particular project. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's super helpful. And
Okay.
to follow up on that, I know that
hmm
you had mentioned the coursework being a pretty important part of kind of how you tell your story. And I was curious to see if you are able to take any elective like across the University of Michigan, or if it's um, kind of restricted to like the School of Engineering and maybe like some
hmm
adjacent programs, or if you know the design
Right.
science program has a specific list of electives that you're able to take.
Right. Well, I'm very, very glad to receive this follow-up question. So, um, it is it is. It's okay, so a couple of wonderful things. Which I'm sure you've caught on to is the pattern at which I answer these sorts of questions is giving you like three answers in one.
Oh, it's great. It
The first
strikes all my
thing,
follow-ups too.
wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so number one, graduate school is a fabulous experience. There's a completely different kind of air to it. When you are an undergraduate, when you're an undergraduate student, there are certain courses that are just off limits to you because you're not enrolled in, that 4 year, 5 year, 3 year, 2 year, however many years, your program is. As a graduate student, um, you kind of and Alicia, please, cut the mic and boot me from from the Zoom recording if I'm speaking out of turn. But as a graduate student, you're kind of you're really you're one of the special individuals. I mean, it's really a university experience as a graduate student is completely different. It's almost night and day from undergraduate. Um, as a graduate student, you can go on to be one of the, you know, key researchers at the institution. So when you start off in a master's program, there's always that potential in the back of your instructor's mind. I mean, not in a way where they're treating you differently. But if you have a question and you say, "Hi, I'm enrolled in this program from this college. I'm studying this as a master's or a PhD student." From this college, and I'm very interested in the course that you're teaching about this or the content of this here. Is there any way that I could be shortlisted for this course? As a graduate student, the answer is almost always yes, which is wonderful. And as a design scientist, you really are encouraged to take as many courses from any direction at the university. There used to be, I don't know if this, well, I'll preface this by saying at the time that I did my course enrollments, there was sort of like a master key of every elective that a design science student had taken with statistics of how many, had enrolled in it. And one of the things I wanted to do during that first semester was take a look at that master key and take a look at my interests and cover up the master key and take a look at my course list and say, okay, I've done these. And then I'd look at my master key and I'd say, so these particular courses might know what it is like. They might have heard of my department. They've certainly heard of people like me. And then for anything that didn't overlap, that was when I would contact my academic advisor and I would say, hey, do we know anybody, over there? Do they know about us? I'm really interested in this course. And absolutely, it worked 100%. So I think there's nothing really off limits. I mean, of course, if the course is, at capacity, that really, that's one thing. But as a graduate student and a course is at capacity, it's sort of like you get moved like up the short list, basically. Everything just feels a little bit faster. And it's because another point to it is that as a graduate student, you really are, um, it's kind of like its own profession, really. So there is an expectation that you will come into the course and you will have a respect for the content or a respect for the discussion around the content in particular. So it becomes almost this attitude of, oh, sure, you're more than welcome to sit in, and we're happy to have you along. I think there was when I was selecting my courses, I did try to pick courses that had very few design scientists in the history of enrollment for that, just because I wanted to practice introducing myself in spaces where they had never heard of people like us, um, so that I could take those experiences and pass them along to other people who were interested in that particular direction. And it gave me a real sense of, getting out of the engineering, I mean, which was it was a difficult transition for me. But I will say that the lessons I learned being around the engineering college, and as particularly in their procedure of measuring a project, is so much better than how what is it? The word escapes me. A multimedia campaign. It's so much easier. Literally anything that an advertiser told me was like, "Oh, we have a difficulty with measuring the success of this." It was like the engineers had one where I was like, "This is perfect. I'll just borrow this and look at that. It's perfect application."
That makes
Um,
a lot of sense.
yeah. So it's you're more than encouraged really to take whichever courses you want. And I would say if there's something really off the walls that you want to study, I'd say go for it. And if seminars are still a thing, I'm sure they are, but if they're still organized in the way that they were when I was enrolled, it's a wonderful opportunity to come in and be the only person who took one really just out there elective and to insert it
Right.
into conversations. Because what you'll see is that that's influencing how your peers in your cohort are also starting to think about design science or the types of content in their courses. So I've always just really been a fan of bringing just the weird out of left field sort of ideas into conversation. So is there a particular school that you're interested in straddling there?
Well, yeah. So my background is in architecture, and what I'm hoping to get a little bit more into through the program would be a little bit more of like the design research, design strategy side of things, and to eventually look for roles in like innovation consulting in the
Hmm.
future. And so I was hoping to build pretty strong relationships with not only the School of Architecture but also the School of Business, and
Okay.
um, and I guess in terms of like courses that I could take, like that's great to hear that 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 seems like pretty open to me. And there are like kind of specific programs within the School of Architecture that I've already looked at, like specifically their like new urban technology program.
Hmm.
Not as familiar with the courses that would be offered in the School of Business, but definitely kind of like looking into that.
Hmm.
And building off that thought, I wanted to ask about what your experience has been making relationships with different professors that you've wanted to work with, because from what I've heard, it seems
Hmm.
like, especially for things like the capstone project, relationships can be very important.
Absolutely. I would say that relationships are very important, full stop, especially in Ann Arbor, mostly because most of the city is the university.
Right.
And you've got two major cities on either side of you. You've got Detroit on one shoulder, and you've got Chicago on another. And just a little bit farther out, you've got Toronto, you've got New York. Um, I just I moved from the South, and I never looked back, so I don't even really think about the major cities down there. But all that's to say, you have two international airports on either side of you. You've got Detroit, which is a hub for Delta, so they've got plenty of international connections, and then you've got O'Hare. Um, what I'm trying to say with that is that connections are incredibly important in the city because you've got people coming in and out from all over, and they're almost always visiting the university. I would say if there's a particular professor or a school that you're interested in, once you get that acceptance letter and everything's just right, I would say immediately hit the ground running. Start
Well,
introducing
since
yourself before you even get, an
Mhm.
apartment or something. Just make those introductions. I'll just go ahead and introduce yourself as a graduate student. I would skip the couple of months of waiting and just and see how far that gets you. Let them uh, not let them. You want to be top of mind for when courses are open for enrollment, and you want to be in the top three when they think of people who, or when they look at, their short list for admissions. Admissions enrollment into the course. It's important to be like in that top three. I don't say that
Makes
with any
sense.
knowledge of statistics. I just say that as like that was always what I tried to be as soon as courses were open. Um, Make those connections. There is a time for interacting with your professors during coursework, absolutely. But it's the kind of experience of grad school is that, you know, um, there will be times when you can go get coffee. There will be times when you can go to lunch and do these sorts of things and really get to interact with these professors in their own environment. And I would say that it becomes so important to meet as many people and make as many connections as quickly as possible, even if you can't get into their course. Because what I've found is that in Ann Arbor, or at least at the University of Michigan, people are very generous with the type of content offered in their course. Most of the people that I took their courses, they really strongly believed in what they were teaching. That if you asked to meet them for a cup of coffee or just, I don't even know, share a bus with them. I never did that personally, but I can't say enough positive things about the transit system here. Um, that you can really get a sense of there's really no question that they aren't prepared to answer, even if you can't get into their course. So, um, I I wasn't really involved with uh any sort of like social or extracurricular activities like when I was in my graduate school experience. Mostly because I tend to just work best on my own, and then, have like my personal time and then like my team time, and that's just sort of like oscillating between the two is like what really works for me. Um, but I would say that it's an entirely different kind of experience. It really does feel more professional. There is an opportunity to meet somebody for coffee. I don't think I started doing that until I was trying to network outside, just after my program, trying to
Right.
look for work. Um, and I would say definitely do that as quickly as possible, really. And like I said earlier, it is a 1 year program. So the sooner you can make those relationships and spend time with those instructors or those entire schools, really just the better. All of that will, if you can put that all in the front end ahead of your capstone
Right.
project, you'll have a stronger sense of what it is you're trying to do with your capstone project
Right.
and how that might be beneficial to somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, if that makes sense.
Yes, that 100% makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, Thanks so much for sharing. I do have to dip a little bit early today because I'm headed back to the office to wrap up a few more things. But I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to speak, Holden. And I wanted to thank you, Alicia, for setting this up. I think this was really, really helpful and informative.
Thanks,
Perfect. Well, thank you so
Pranav.
much for joining.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Take care.
Lucy, do you have any questions for Holden?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much, Holden, for taking the time to sort of walk us through the program and just sort of giving us an overview of what to expect. And I think, Pranav had some amazing questions that answered a lot of my own as well. But I just had a couple of questions to go off of that I'd love to have answered. And just to give you some context, so I have applied for the program. I have a background in apparel design and
Hmm.
I currently already hold a master's degree
Oh,
in apparel
fabulous.
design.
Hmm.
And I am basically trying to pivot into design and tech
Hmm.
um, with sort of a more, I guess I'd like to become more of a design generalist because I've already specialized heavily. And I felt that this program, even though it gives you the possibility of specializing in the space that you
Hmm.
would like to, it's also well-rounded enough to make sure that you have a breadth of skills to give you that
Hmm.
generalized um, perspective of design. And then, each person could individualize the program and
Right.
specialize in it the way that they wanted to. And that's what really drew me into this program as well. And the fact that it's, a 1 year program, it sort of is the right kind of accelerated program to give me what I'm looking for, which is to basically catalyze my career path.
Mhm.
So that's just context about myself. As far as questions go, I think first question that I had is looking at it from a point of, okay, it's a 1 year program. It is um, intensive in the sense that there is a lot that can be achieved in the 1 year
Mhm.
while building a breadth of skills as opposed to pure depth. What I'm interested in is in getting your perspective how one might go about doing that. Essentially, even though, of course, you pick a focus to do your study on, for me specifically, I would like to make sure that I explore several different areas. How
Mhm.
do you think I can go about doing something like that in the 1 year that we have for the
Okay.
program?
So I think the best way to start answering this question would be to uh, share a little bit of how my last semester went. Near the end of the last semester, there's sort of an audit that's performed, or at least there was when I was in the program. There's a little bit of an audit that's performed on your electives, just to sort of somebody impartial takes a look at it and says, okay, yeah, looks like depth and breadth achieved there. I got an email, I think just a couple months before my capstone project, where somebody was looking at my electives and they said, "Hey, Holden, I was just wondering if just taking a look at your electives and I was wondering if you could sort of explain them to me." And I was on the bus when this happened, and I remember thinking, I don't care what the next stop is, I have to get off and I have to write this email like right now. I'm a very anxious person, just generally, and so that was not how I expected my afternoon to go. But the point of this particular story is to say that if you come into the program with your depth established. For example, mine was visual communication design. If you come into the program with that depth and you explain the trajectory of what you're trying to, where you're trying to go, in my experience, the faculty and the academic advisors are very they have a very positive response to just building that breadth. So that was why I took all these courses in social work and entrepreneurship and everything, because as I expanded this with the 1 year that we had, I already had my depth. So if I moved into a social working space as a data visualization professional, I already had all of my experience as visualizing that data. I would just need to learn the code here and there, but I knew the best ways to present legible information that could be scanned easily and, yada yada, things that would take 5 years to explain, but if you really come into it with that sense of I want to expand this skill set as much as possible this way, um, that was really that's the best use of the 1 year, in my opinion. Sort of hit all these marks, um, find a particular area that is interested to you, and then as that area is identified, make that the focus of your capstone project, which is what I did. I looked at the intersection of community experience with strategic marketing, and I came into the project and I looked at the needs of the project and I said, well, look, if we can involve the community in this, I think there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't be any less successful. And in fact, it was actually more successful. So there's nothing wrong with coming in with your depth and wanting to just focus on your breadth. Um, I mean, I knew people who pivoted and were able to, wanted to do both, and they did. But like I said, if you're coming in with a very confident set of skills and you just want to see all the different areas that you can apply that, I think this is still a very strong program for that. I also want to say that you're certainly in the right city. Detroit has a fabulous history of garment manufacturing. It was once an incredible center of fashion design, like of garment and textile design in the United States. Um, in fact, there was a couple of years ago, there was a accessibility workshop around outerwear for um, persons with physical limitations who lived an active lifestyle. And if you're interested in that, I can definitely try and find a link to that. It's held annually,
Okay.
and it's an interesting experience. Hmm.
That would be wonderful actually, because
Oh, sure.
within apparel design, so I'm a design researcher, not just a
Hmm.
designer, and my focus on design research was in functional apparel. So
Mm,
essentially, the work that I've done is all about inclusivity, adaptability. Those
right.
are the
That
areas that I focused on.
that actually reminds me that I would not be. I could certainly make an introduction. There was somebody in my cohort who came in specific with a specific interest in designing for functional wear,
Okay.
and I can make an introduction, and I think their course might like their course list might be particularly interesting to you because I think a lot of their electives came from the School of Kinesiology. They came from a
Perfect.
background at Tufts, so I think they were. I think I only ever saw them at seminar, and I shared one class with them. But But there certainly is a precedent for this particular kind of student. So I can honestly say you'd certainly be you would not be the first in the design science program. So this could be a right spot for you.
Perfect. That was actually going to be my second question, because I wanted to know if, like Pranav had asked earlier, I have a lot of interest in, taking electives from other departments as well,
Hmm.
specifically because, I'm focused on human factors, I'm ho focused on design and tech. So very interest that I think needs to sort of be squeezed into 1 year. And that was going to be my second question. I'm
Hmm.
actually interested in taking classes from the Department of Kinesiology. So it's great that I'm able to make that connection on this call, because it will really answer a lot of the questions that I have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely. Well,
Thank you so
fantastic.
much for taking the
Of
time to
course.
answer the questions that I had. It was truly fantastic, so informative, and yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
No, that's you answered everything before I even had a chance to ask, so it's fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, of course, you're very welcome.
Yep.
I love it.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, perfect. Holden, we have about 9 minutes left, so you've covered everything so perfectly in the perfect amount of
Wow.
time. So if you do have any questions, I'm going to drop in the chat my email. I think we've communicated though before, but just to make sure. So send me an email and I will forward that over to Holden to get you in contact with that student in the cohort, though, to connect you all
Hmm.
together. And then I think that you've said you've already applied, right? So we don't
Yes.
we don't need to
So,
cover app deadlines because you're done. Check, check, check. All good there. So well done, because that deadline was March 15th for design science. So well done getting it in on time. Check. Way to go. If there's no other questions from you, I have just a wrap up question for Holden then. I just wanted to ask, I think I know the answer, Holden, to this question throughout this webinar, but
Hmm.
would you recommend the program overall?
I certainly would. I certainly would. I think it's I'll tell you, so I won't, I won't just say, yeah, sure, of course I will. I would say that I certainly would because I think this kind of program really attracts a certain kind of person who's looking for an answer to a question that not a lot of people are asking. And if that student finds themselves sort of sniffing around this this question, uh, they absolutely owe it to themselves to find the answer to that question. I really do truly believe that, well, um, I know I shared that personal statement earlier, but I didn't say really why I chose design science. What I hoped to really get out of it, at the end of my career or my lifetime or however really you want to phrase that. Um, it was because I wanted to be a part of an academic curriculum that really thought of design as something that existed in its own college, even like not even just in an art department or in automotive or something. I mean, certainly design has applications in all of those areas, but it's because design means something different to each field. But when I think of design, I really do think of it as just being this word for change, and the kinds of exercises that you're taught through a discipline can really transcend and be useful in any area that you hope to apply them. And so I thought if I was lucky, I could spend the rest of my life trying to make that academic program come to life and maybe exist if I was lucky, you know, in the eighth floor of some building downtown, and just struggling to make rent on the space and so glad for the 18 students who believed in me. Um, and then I found design science, and I thought, my God, that just saved me 30 years. So I think if you find yourself as that particular kind of designer or that particular, you don't call yourself a designer, but you feel the same way, I think this is absolutely the program for you. And it's my hope as an alumnus and a graduate of this program is that more people like you and and anybody who just thinks, I don't know if I'd fit in here. It is my hope that more of you find yourselves in this particular environment and aren't put off by the engineering school that's attached to it, because this is really the kind of motivation and progress that design needs. If you were interested in learning more about design in your own discipline, you could do that. But it's when design becomes something that's shared between people who don't even define it as the same thing, that something really special comes out of it. And I honestly believe, truly, that that is why I am so glad I am a designer, is because every year I have this new idea of what design could be, but I never, ever, ever forget what I want design to do for the people in my community.
I love that, Holden. Thank you. That's so well put. And I just when you were talking about making connections and things, it's very true because I still remember meeting Holden as a student, and I've always remembered him so fondly in my memories. And so when looking back at design science alums, I was like, oh, Holden, I know exactly what I want to speak with prospective students. So it's very true. Getting to meet staff and faculty and stuff is really key, I think, to having a good time in your program and getting those connections and things. Hopefully, I can help Holden. I mean, he's just helping me right now. So I haven't really helped you out a whole lot, Holden, but you've helped me. So,
Oh no, these I love doing these sorts of things. They're really fun.
but no. So thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Hopefully, this helps answer your questions about the program, and that this helps your decision making and everything. Holden, thank you so much for joining us today. I just so appreciate you. And as always, go blue, everyone.
Code
Um,
Blue.
so